States of America, and only in America. Only in America can such a thing happen. And Mr. Romney says I raise taxes. What he doesn't tell you is that he raised $500 million in fees, mostly on small business people. That's a tax, folks. If you're in small business, you know. And you know something? I know that a lot of the folks on Wall Street have just been pummeling me. You know why? Because I'm not a wholly owned subsidiary of the folks on Wall Street that move paper and make a lot of money doing it. Well, I'm a champion of the guys on Main Street who are running a store and a cleaners and who are going into business for themselves, because 80% of the jobs in this country come from small business. And the day the Republican Party forgets where the real economic engine of America is the day that we'll become the permanent minority party of America. Small business people in this country are the backbone of our economy. We've got to never forget that. Mr. Romney says I'm a little soft on crime. The 16 people on which I carried out an execution probably would disagree. He never had to do that. That's hardly soft on crime. The fact is the crime rates in my state went down during my tenure as governor. And when he says on his ad that we cut penalties for methamphetamine, no, actually I signed a bill in 1999 that doubled the penalties for methamphetamine. In 2005, we had a bill that only changed the maximum time that one must serve, but the sentences stayed the same. And here's what he didn't tell you in his ad. What he didn't tell you was that our methamphetamine penalties are 4 times harsher than his were in Massachusetts. And he says that he fought for it. Well, that means in the last 30 days in office, he tried to put a bill out there, but the legislature didn't even consider it. So nothing changed in his state. In my state it did. And meth labs in my state went down 48% during my tenure as governor. I'd love to see that put in his ad, just for a little bit of truth. And by the way, he says that the spending went up. New York Times did an article just today. I thought it was rather fascinating. A little fact check. So this isn't my figures, this is the New York Times. And by the way, today, I really love the New York Times. I think they're a great paper. Because they show that over the course of 10.5 years as governor, adjusted for inflation, spending in my state actually went up 1.23%, which was less than it went up in his state in 4 years. Those are the real facts. The reason I'm telling you that is because the people of Iowa over the next 5-6 days are going to make some really, really important decisions about who their next president is going to be. And quite frankly, I think you ought to elect a president not because he's been able to disable his opponents, and not because he's been dishonest with the people about his opponents. Because just remember this, if somebody's dishonest in order to get a job, how can you trust them to be honest when they get the job? He also said, I've made a lot of clemency decisions. And he heralds the number. But here's some things that Newsweek Fact Check, I think, was that organization that put forth on their website. I believe it was them. But here's an interesting thing. Did you know that in my state, laws are different in each state. I had 8,700 different clemency cases sitting on my desk in my tenure as governor. He had 100 cases in his entire tenure as governor. 90% of them I rejected. Some of them I wish I had rejected. They didn't all turn out great. He'll boast that he never, ever granted one, not one. He'll make that as if that's a badge of honor. Let me tell you what that really means. It means that he decided, not necessarily in the best interest of the person whose case was before him, or even the citizens, but I can tell you this politically. If you want to be just playing good politics, you never, ever, ever grant a commutation, because it never gets you a vote, it never wins you a thing. You would deny every one of them. But I took my job seriously, and I read through every request. And I believe that it was my constitutional duty to give consideration, regardless of a person's age, or race, or gender, or who they were and who they knew. Let me give you a couple of cases, and you tell me if you think the right decision was made. In one case, there was a kid who at age 13 shot a BB gun at another kid, hit him in the arm. Didn't break the skin, but it was technically an infraction. So it got on the kid's record. Now the kid went on to work his way through college, paid his own way, then enlisted in the National Guard. He was called up to active duty to serve in Iraq, and he went to Iraq and fought in combat in the Sunni Triangle, and for his combat duty received the Bronze Star. He came back home. He wanted to be a police officer. That was his dream as a career. But that incident that happened when he was 13 years old was on his record, and it was not possible for him to become a police officer as long as that was on his record. So he applied for a pardon so that that record would be cleared and he would be able, having now served his country in combat, to have his dream and to be a police officer. Twice, the parole board recommended that he would get that pardon. So what would you do if you were the governor and that's on your desk? Let me just see. How many of you would have granted that pardon, those circumstances? Can I see your hands? Okay, the lights are bright, but it looks pretty solid. Now, how many of you under those circumstances would not have granted that pardon? I'm not trying to, trick you, but I don't see any hands. I don't see one hand. So one of the things you just told me is that if you were governor and that came to your desk, you would have said yes to that pardon. Well, there is a real case like that. The young man's name was Anthony Sarcosto. The state wasn't mine, it was Massachusetts, and Mitt Romney said no. He kept his record clean, but he ruined that kid's life and kept his record spotted so he couldn't become a police officer, even though he had put on the uniform of this country and dodged bullets for you and me. And if that's the kind of judgment you want, you can have it. I'll tell you a different kind of case. 26-year-old kid went one day joyriding with a friend of his. Came, picked up the car, went riding around, didn't realize the car the guy picked him up in was stolen. Police pulled him over, arrested the driver, and he was arrested because he was an accessory. Now, he didn't steal the car, but he was in it. And he had some culpability. And as a result of that, he got on his record, and even though he never served a day in jail, and he paid a fine and was on probation, and still it was on his record. At age 26, he wanted to go to culinary school and become a chef. He'd make pretty good money at that, but the problem was he couldn't get into the school with that on his record. So his case comes, recommended for consideration and for pardon. What would you do? Would you give the kid a second chance? How many of you would? Just out of curiosity. Okay? How many of you would not? Looks like, once again, pretty unanimous crowd. Well, that case was on my desk, and those pardons that he talks about, that was one of them. And a whole bunch of them were people who at age 35 wanted to go to work in a nursing home or a daycare center. They were now single moms or maybe married and responsible people with not a blight on their record, but when they were 18, wrote a hot check. And that was still in their record, and that kept them from getting employed, kept them from getting work until they got that pardon. I didn't make those decisions because they were easy, and I didn't make them because they were going to help me politically. I didn't make them because one day I knew that it would make me look real good in television ads when I was running for president, because I never expected to be running for president. I just wanted to be the best governor I could be for the state of Arkansas, and for that I don't apologize. And I don't apologize for making the decisions that I made, because I wanted to make those decisions based on what was best for the people that had hired me to do that job. I made mistakes. If you don't believe I did, all you got to do is talk to some folks back home who will tell you all of them that I made, and some of them that they just think I made. And if that doesn't work, talk to my wife. She's got a whole big, long laundry list of them, and she can sure tell you. But I never forgot who the boss was. And that's why on the wall in my outer office, when you first walked in,